we have for questions. You can write it out and hand it to a deacon, or you can just raise your hand and we'll bring a microphone to you. So those are a couple of the ways that we'll handle this. We haven't quite gotten started with our on-the-air version, though, so just wanted to make sure we were all in the moment and ready to go. Oh, we're going. We're on the air. All right, that's good. Well, we'd like to welcome Amanda back to the front. We're so grateful she's with us. She, again, is a licensed family and marriage counselor. And so if you have some good questions over what she's covered in her content or things that might be appropriate for her in general, she does specialize in, as you know, the cognitive behavioral therapy approach, as well as anxiety and depression recovery, and a lot of other topics as well. All right, so with that, she has a couple of questions to get us started.
Okay, so the first one, now I want everybody to remember, I have limited information here, okay? So I am giving answers based on what is written only, and I don't know the background, so remember that that's how I'm doing it. I would need a lot more information most of the time to make a response. So the first one is, other than listening for the Holy Spirit's prompting, what is the best approach for bringing up the urgency of our times with a wayward son in his 30s? He knows my beliefs and respects them, but he doesn't seem interested in discussing the times or changing the course of his life. I believe in the power of prayer and will never stop that. Just searching for a correct approach when the Holy Spirit provides the opportunity. Okay, tall order here. One of the things that I would recommend that I talked about in the sermon earlier today is that make sure that your life is right with the Lord and that you look happy in doing it. You will never be attractive to your children if your life doesn't look like ideal. This probably isn't the best example, but I believe it. I've never read this book, but I heard the story. Is it Huckleberry Finn or Mark Twain or something, where he got punished and had to paint the fence? Huckleberry Finn. He had to paint the fence, and he decided he was really upset because he wanted to play with his friends. So what did he do? He made it look like painting the fence was the best thing ever. Now, obviously, we don't want to fake our Christianity. So you have to work that out with God to make it so that you're actually enjoying your Christianity. And a lot of times, too, what happens with parents is they're so scared for their kids because they know better. But that fear makes Christianity not look like the best thing. Like, I don't want to be, if I'm a kid and I just want to enjoy my life, I don't want to join something that looks like I have to be worried about Armageddon all the time, you know? And sometimes we do that. We want to have a joy in our lives. So absolutely pray, keep doing that, don't stop. Fasting, too. One of the things that I do, not just for this reason, but there's many health benefits as well, is fasting. Fasting and praying. I do that for my clients once a week. Usually my clients will bring up different things and I fast and pray for them while I'm going through my fasting. And, you know, we have to trust that God's doing. Do you know who loves your child more than you do? God does. So you're not praying hoping God cares as much as you do about your child. You're praying, asking him what you can do while God is doing what he's doing for them. And so that's the thing that I recommend. But, you know, kids just aren't going to understand all the time the same way you do when you get older and older and older and you realize that life is coming to an end, whether God comes or you die first. And so we do have to trust, but definitely make your home the most desirable place to be, because that's what brings them back to. What did the prodigal son think? when he was out there in the, pits with the pigs. My dad's servants have it better than I have it. So I think that's something that we need to keep in mind too, is make your home really desirable. Nothing in the world could compare to that. So, but we have to ask God how to do that too, because some of us don't know that. Okay? I didn't get to read this first, so I just want to make sure I read it right. Okay, what can you do when others are unwilling to look at the other side of the evidence and use their perceptions of a situation to gaslight you? How do you keep your head above water? So one of my favorite topics is boundaries. I love talking about boundaries. I'm sorry I didn't do that this weekend, but you can go online maybe in the podcast as well. But one of the things I think, and I've had to learn this myself, most of this stuff I'm learning as I'm teaching it to other people, is that I can't make people understand things. Could God make Lucifer understand? No. That's one of the things when we all get free will, we can't make other people understand. And one of the healthiest things that we can do is realize that sometimes I stay in the battle because I'm trying to get them to understand my point of view. And if somebody doesn't want to, if they want to choose to believe what they're believing, they're not going to necessarily. And so what am I doing then, trying and trying and trying? I'm wasting my time. I'm just spinning my wheels. And so one of the healthiest things you can do is be willing to walk away. Now, I don't know the circumstances of this, so I don't know all the things that are going on, but usually when I see somebody going back and getting gaslit over and over and over, does everybody know what gaslighting is? Okay. Yes, I'll define it first. So gaslighting, the term, I believe, came from a movie that came out, I want to say like in the 1920s. It was a really old movie. I never saw it. I only read about it because I kept hearing people talk about this term. And this movie, in the movie, the wife would leave the house, and then you didn't have light switches and all the sorts of electricity the way that we do it now. Every time she would leave, he would dim the lights so that when she came back, she would think, oh, it's darker in here. Do you notice it's darker? And he'd say, I don't notice anything. So what was happening? He was messing with her thinking, causing her to question her own sanity. And that's what gaslighting is. Anytime when you try to discuss something with somebody and they don't want to listen, or they say, oh, you're just saying that because of so-and-so, or you never remember anything right, that's gaslighting. They're not willing to discuss with you what's going on. They're not willing to resolve the situation. So instead, what do? They keep putting it back on you. You're the problem. So that you start to question yourself and what actually happened. So if you're dealing with somebody who does that, what's the best course of action? Stop going back. You might have to leave for a time. There are some times when the best thing in a relationship is to walk away. By the way, God even did this in the Old Testament. When his people wouldn't follow him, he withdrew his protective care. And so in this situation, actually even in the other situation too, with the young person or the son, sometimes we keep giving things too, trying to get them to change. Sometimes the best thing is to not give those things anymore. And then they realize, oh, I'm missing stuff. So it could be things, it could be resources, but it can also be your company. If you pull away, you're not giving that person all of that stuff anymore, that maybe they're just keeping you there. If you walk away, it gives them a chance, maybe even for the Holy Spirit to do his work. So don't keep getting gaslit and trying to argue with somebody that's not willing to listen. Any other questions? Oh, okay. So it says, if a person has major fear and depression, how much should they focus on earlier trauma plus or CBT? That's a lot in a little bit of information. By the way, cognitive behavioral therapy does include trauma work. So you can do trauma work with cognitive behavioral therapy. So I'll just say cognitive behavioral therapy is like an umbrella term. It's like saying anxiety. I have anxiety. Well, what kind of anxiety do you have? Do you have generalized anxiety disorder? Do you have OCD, which is also an anxiety disorder? Do you have phobias? Do you have PTSD? Those are all anxiety. Do you have social anxiety? Fear of being judged by others. So when we say CBT, that's an umbrella term, and there's a lot of different types of therapies that you can do within that. And there is trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. There's other types of therapies too. So you can get all of that from that. Obviously, you want to have a Bible-believing person to help you with it too. And the other thing too, I do have to say this because I never want to steer anybody wrong. A lot of Christians do things like hypnosis and stuff, and they consider it okay. So just because a Christian and even a Bible-believing person tells you they want to try something on you, if you're getting the heebie-jeebies from it and you don't think it's biblical, that's okay. Don't do it. You don't have to trust them just because they say they're a Christian. There are things that other Christians do, and even Seventh-day Adventists do, that I wouldn't do. So in terms of treating other people, I wouldn't do it. And by the way, some of those things, you actually have to have them done to you in order to do them to other people. I'm not about to let somebody take over my thinking and that sort of thing. So why would I ever learn that and have it done to me so I can do it to somebody else? So hope that answers that question.
Does anybody have any questions in the audience? You want to raise your hand?
Is there anything that you can help a person that gets white coat syndrome to change their thinking like the day before they have to go to the doctor? I mean, his blood pressure goes to 180 and, he feels like he's dying, and he just doesn't know how to change that thinking.
So I'm assuming white coat syndrome, we don't have this in the DSM, so it means you're afraid of going to the doctor or any health professional or something like that.
His blood pressure goes to 180 and he just feels like he's going to die. The minute the nurse takes it, it's like horrible. As soon as the doctor comes in, it starts going down. But like 24 hours before, he's just awful. I mean, he's just sick.
Is that enough of an incentive to change your lifestyle for him?
I don't know.
Because that might be a good thing. If you're afraid to go to the doctor, just change your lifestyle and then you never have to go. But I know that's not your question. Obviously, the reframing will help. One of the ways you can do that is he can consider, why am I going in the first place versus what could possibly be happening. I actually like to go to the dentist. Does anybody else like to go to the dentist? I love going to the dentist for cleanings. I mean, maybe the other stuff, but I love going to the dentist because I love that slick feeling on my teeth after they're done cleaning. I will even plan my dental appointment for the evening. I won't eat anything afterwards so I can get the longest enjoyment out of having like clean teeth before I adulterate them with food. It feels so good. But that's one of the ways that he can start to think about that. Obviously, that's a little weird. Maybe I'm being very vulnerable. But think of what good can come from going. If it's because there's a concern about his health that's come up, well, what can the doctor tell him? What can the test do? It can give you a chance to catch anything before. A lot of people don't like to go because they don't want to know what's going on. But what's the bad with that? You can't do anything if you don't know what the problem is. So reframing and thinking about what are the benefits to going versus just what the problem is. That won't alleviate all of his fears, but it can take some of the edge off. Yeah.
How would you recommend someone with like chronic pain or a physical disability deal with like anxiety or depression over that like injury or pain?
So, by the way, I hate to keep pounding on the cognitive behavioral therapy. Do you know what they do in pain management programs? You don't just get pain medication. They actually encourage you to do cognitive behavioral therapy with it. Do you know the way you think about something can actually alleviate pain? So if you have 100% pain and you could alleviate it to 70%, or if you have 70% pain and you could alleviate it to 30%, wouldn't you do it? Just by changing the way you think about it. So you can reframe even what's going on. Now, I know that's not easy all the time to do, but if you sit down and you start paying attention to, what could be worse? That's one way of looking at it. Now, that doesn't help everybody go, oh, well, it could be worse. But I like to encourage people to look at the big picture something. Sometimes we focus so much on what we're going through that we don't see, in terms of all that's happening in the world, it could be worse. I could be in a war-torn country. I could be experiencing all sorts of things. I was in Rwanda in 2007, and it put a totally different perspective on my life. I saw all the aftermath of the genocide that had happened there. People walking around with their arms, the joint was here because there was a break and it never got healed and set. And so it's just dangling from at this point. And so watching that gave me a whole different perspective on my life. I don't think about my things the same way that I used to. And also, too, I think oftentimes focusing on the pain so much, that's like the rumination, when we can distract ourselves from it. Because here's the thing about your brain. Do you know that your brain, when it comes to pain, I believe the gentleman's name is Merzenich. If you look into some of his studies, your brain actually remembers pain and then perpetuates it. It's like if you have an engine on your train, and that's the pain, and every time or I should say the whole train is the pain, but the engine is the first sign of pain. The brain will remember all the other symptoms that go with it, and it'll be like, even if it's not actually happening that way, it'll encourage for you to remember all of that pain. So an example of that would be, say for instance, I have anxiety. Well, if anxiety attacks or panic attacks, usually somebody has a symptom and then multiple other symptoms come up after that. So it could be like difficulty breathing or tightness in their chest, and then the racing thoughts or the spiraling thoughts, and then the sweating, and then all the other stuff goes along. If you even reframe that first symptom, the others don't necessarily come. So for instance, if you have anxiety attacks or panic attacks, when you have the tightness in your chest, what is tightness in chest could signal to somebody, oh, I'm having a panic attack. But what's another reason we might have tightness in our chest that's not an emergency? Heartburn. I ate potluck too fast. That's not an emergency. Or I'm out of breath. Are there times I'm out of breath that's not an emergency? I was just exercising. If I tell myself, oh, that's not a big deal. I lose my breath when I'm exercising. I'm fine. All those other symptoms don't come along in that train. You can stop a panic attack from happening if you just ask yourself that. You could also run around in circles too really fast and realize you're not having a heart attack after all, because you couldn't do that with a heart attack. That's another way to do it. But too often we focus on it so much that we actually keep bringing it up over and over again when it could be a lot less. So I love learning hacks for your own brain. If you study your brain, you can learn hacks to keep things from happening. Like if I feel a little bit sick or something, like I get a sore throat, usually the first sign that I'm getting sick, I tell myself, oh, that's no big deal, it'll go away. And half the time I don't get all the other symptoms after. What do we usually do though? oh, I'm getting sick. Tomorrow I'm going to be on my bed and I'm going to be so sick and everything. And so the body goes, okay, I guess we're getting sick. That's what's happening. So learn to hack some of the things that your brain does. Our minds can be smart, but our brain is not always smart the way it works. So learn to hack your brain. Learn what your brain does and hack it. Yes. Oh, right there first. Sorry.
One of the things I've heard about a number of times is eye movement desensitization. Is that what it is? What is that, and is that anything that, as Christians, we should be partaking in?
Okay. So there are a lot. That's actually what I was referring to earlier. Is something. So when I was working in the group home, we were all given the opportunity to learn how to do EMDR, what you just said. And EMDR, if you know the woman, or if you know of the woman who came up with it, so here's the story. Tell me what you think about this. She's walking through a park. This is how she tells it. This is how she came up with it. She's walking through a park, and her eyes are switching back and forth rapidly, and she notices that all of her anxiety and stress goes away. And so she develops EMDR based on it. So what is EMDR? EMDR is a light flashing in front of your eyes, and you follow it back and forth while you're doing CBT, by the way. So it's going back and forth. You're talking about your trauma, or you have earphones on and you hear a click, 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 and while you're talking about your trauma, or you have paddles, one under this hand, one under this, and you get a vibration this hand, vibration this one, back and forth while you're talking about your trauma. It's supposed to release you from all. I'm not an expert on this, so I can't tell you everything, and I've had people tell me, no, you're wrong, Amanda, I've studied this. But would any of you have that done to them? If you're a therapist, let somebody else do that to you? I know some people may have had this done, and usually everywhere I go, somebody has had it done. But for me, I don't trust it. It just sounds too much like hypnosis to me. And the other thing, too, is it's ironic how many times I hear people say that it helped them, but they're in my group or in my office. And this takes me back to Genesis. What happened when Eve ate of the fruit? Her eyes were opened. What must that have felt like for the first time just in that moment? Full-on enlightenment. Isn't that what Satan promised? But did it help her in the end? No. And I think too often what happens in our society, again, this is my opinion, I want you to study, be like the Bereans and go look this stuff up yourself. But far too often in my profession, and by the way, therapy, most of what we learn comes from Middle East traditions and religious practices and rituals. Just so you know that. That's most of what you learn. Even in a lot of our Adventist institutions, when we learn psychology, all of this stuff. Now, there's meditation, Middle Eastern practice, and then there's biblical meditation. What's the difference? This is emptying the mind or doing some kind of mantra. This is filling the mind with God's word and his promises, just like David did. There's mindfulness. There's healthy mindfulness, and then there's not so healthy mind. If you read Mind, Character, and Personality, Ellen White talks about being mindful of the things that we do. That's just paying attention to what we're doing and why we're doing it, and allowing ourselves to be cleansed by the Holy Spirit to have right hearts. But mindfulness in Eastern practices can be a wholly different thing. So this is why I don't necessarily... I wouldn't have it done to myself. And by the way, the people that in my office that had it done, they had to take a couple days off afterwards because it was very overwhelming to them. So, yes. Well, there's one in the back too. Is this to this one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just curious. Do you mean Far Eastern philosophy or Middle Eastern philosophy?
Sorry, Far Eastern philosophy,
Okay,
yeah.
okay,
Not
yeah.
Middle Eastern. I don't know why I said that. I'm tired.
Yeah.
Please correct me and then let me know you're correcting me because I'm exhausted. And warm.
I'll give a little bit of history and then I'll ask a question.
Mm-hmm.
When I was born, the umbilical cord just about took my life. At 2 weeks old, my older brother, who was 2 years old, dragged me off of a bed, and I had a severe head injury, and my head ballooned up twice the size it should have been. And I've always been a slow learner, slow adapter through my life. And from childhood until adulthood, physical and mental high-level criminal abuse. Dad should have went to prison. And
You're talking about somebody hurt you and went to prison?
no.
Oh. Okay,
He
sorry.
should have went to prison.
Okay.
He should have. But I have times to where I have severe pressure in my head, and I go into an involuntary vacuum. There's no thoughts. There's nothing. I can't function, and I feel helpless, and I call out to God, and it doesn't make a difference. Maybe it's a thorn in the flesh. I don't know. But how much of that is the result of abuse or injury or both that you...
Well, it sounds like all of that is the result of abuse and injury. What you're going through, and I think I can't imagine what you're experiencing and what you go through, especially when you talked about moments where you don't have any thoughts. I think that's what you said, and you go in a vacuum. Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it'll last a day or two.
Mm-hmm.
And I just can't function.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's the result of the trauma and the injuries that you've gone through. Yeah.
I fell from a ladder. I was on the second tier when I was an adult, and I took a total body slam on concrete.
Oh.
Knocked myself out cold for a severe concussion. I've had about 3 or 4 severe concussions in my life, and the first one was at 2.5 weeks old.
Mm-hmm.
And it has made life a hard struggle.
Yeah.
Any feedback at all?
Well, I'm not a doctor, so I can't speak to all the medical ramifications of that, and a doctor would be better able to help you with that. I have to speak within my scope of knowledge, but a lot of people that do have brain injuries do have trouble afterwards, even with depression, anxiety, and that sort of thing. So I don't know if you've gone through any testing and to see if there are things that you can do with that, because sometimes you're not no one is without hope. We all get a new body and a new mind when we go to heaven one day, and that's a great reward for those of us who have experienced great, insult and hurt. Thank God that we have that to look forward to. But in the meantime, you might ask some people in, the medical field what options there are for you. That would be the best course of action, I would think. And there's one in the back. You've been waiting, I know.
When you're in the middle of a panic attack, if you're like at work and you can take a break, but you're taking the break because you're trying to get out of the panic attack, is there something that you can do at that time to stop the panic attack? Is there something that you can do at home and practice, and then when you have that experience at work, you can go to it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are a few things that you can do. One thing that you can do is something we call box breathing. It's only called box breathing because you're breathing in for 4 seconds, holding for 4 seconds, breathing out for 4 seconds, holding for 4 seconds. What that does is it slows down your heart rate, increases oxygen to your brain, and when you want to slow down your heart rate or you want to slow down your breathing because that slows your heart rate. And that's really important, especially when you're having a panic attack. Another thing that you can do anytime you feel anxiety, anybody can do this, is one, where most of the time panic attacks happen because we're focused on what's going on in here. So focus on something outside. So one of the ways you can do that is focus on 5 things that you can see. So, and literally point them out to yourself. So I see the drapes over there. I see all the people in the room. I see cameras. I see the AV people in the back. And I see these chandeliers in here. 5 things. Now I go to 4. 4 things I can touch. And I'm literally going to touch them. This, what does this feel like? This wood feel like? What does the bench feel like? That's a different fabric. This, what does this feel like? What does my skirt feel like? Sometimes you'll see people when they're anxious, they'd rub their arms. It's kind of the same thing. But you want to get to the present. You want to be here versus when you're having anxiety, you're thinking of all the things that are going to happen versus being right here and right now in the present. 3 things that you can smell. Or actually, no, 3 things that you can hear. Okay? So what can you hear? Let's all be quiet for a second and think of what can we hear. Is there an AC running or something in the back? Right? I can hear people doing slight adjustments. Wow, my mind is going blank right now. You guys are so quiet. I can't hear anything. Maybe the ringing in my ears. So 3 things that you can hear. Then the last 2, you might have to get a little creative with this because you're not going to be necessarily smelling a lot of stuff, but what you can do is imagine certain smells. So for me, one of my favorite smells is the smell of grapefruit. Can you all imagine what grapefruit smells like right now? Yeah, you can do that. Or maybe vanilla. What does vanilla smell like? You can start to imagine that right now. And then the last thing you do is think of something that you can taste. Now, it doesn't have to be something literally in your mouth right now, but like, who made the macaroni, the vegan macaroni? Oh, that was wonderful. I know a lot of other people liked it because when I went back, there wasn't any. But I can imagine the taste of that right now in my mouth. I also like the salad. Thank you for recommending the salad. So I can imagine those flavors in my mouth right now, even though I'm not actually eating them. What just happened when I did that? I was distracted from what's going on inside of me. And when you do that, now you can't just rattle off a couple things and go, okay, I'm done. Why didn't that help? Keep doing it. You really have to invest in those 5 things that you're focused on. And all of those are your senses, and they're all outside of you versus what's inside. And so often what we do is we focus more on how we're feeling versus what's happening around us. And by the way, I have helped people get out of panic attacks in very little time just by asking them to look around them. I didn't even go through all those 5 things, because what happens when I say, oh, notice that tree over there? Is it standing up or is it fallen down? No, it's standing up. They're not focused on what they're feeling anymore. They're focused on something out here that is tangible. And by the way, nothing is bad is going on around me. It only feels bad in here. So that's another thing that you can do. Another thing that you can do that is quite helpful is ask somebody for a hug. Because you've got all of those all that cortisol going on inside of you. What happens when the baby is born, comes out of the womb? What does the doctor do? Puts the baby in the mama's arms. They don't clean them up anymore. They just put them all gross and everything in your arms right away. Why do they do that? Because both the mother and the child have been struggling for however long. All that cortisol is building up. What happens when you touch each other? Oxytocin. It's calming. It also builds trust, too. So when you get a hug from somebody, and don't let them just give you a normal, like, hey, how are you doing hug? hold on like 20 seconds. Those are those uncomfortable hugs where the person's still holding on. You're like, oh, okay, I guess we're holding on longer. Do a longer hug and just let yourself feel it. Don't think about when it's going to end. Let the other person take care of that part, but you just feel it. That's a good way to do it too. Another question?
Yes, I have one actually.
Mm-hmm.
But first, I'm going to put in a good plug for what, shamelessly, of course, for the Brain People podcast. Came upon it about a year and a half ago, and I've not listened to all 77. But
I didn't even know that's how many there were.
There's 77, yes. But I'd like to ask, because there are people here that may need some help, and you and Dr. Daniel Binus and Dr. Katie Elson now
Cruz.
Elson now Cruz, married to Pastor Aaron. Do you have some type, and you're based in Angwin?
We're based in Auburn, California, North Auburn, California.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Just south of Weimar, if you know where that is.
Yeah.
Only Adventists know where Weimar is.
That's right.
Actually, no, that's not true. A lot of people go there for the depression and anxiety recovery program that aren't Adventists.
With your website that you shared today for the church, and our guests that are here today as well, do you have some type of clinical mechanism to treat people telehealth? If people from the Walla Walla Valley wanted to reach out to you and the doctors of the practice as well.
Thank you so much for bringing that up. So, I don't believe anybody in my practice is licensed to practice outside of California, but, so every morning, Monday through Friday, I run what we call an intensive outpatient program. And I've learned now that word can be really intimidating, that word intensive. It is not intensive because you're going to be pulled and stretched and everything, that kind of thing. It's intensive because it's Monday through Friday versus just going once a week to therapy. And it's a downgrade from being hospitalized. So up from weekly counseling and down from being 24/7 care. We do that every day, or I run that program every day in the mornings, but we have just developed an IOP, or intensive outpatient program, that you can do online. And so if you go on our website, you can actually get help. Now, all of the stuff that you would learn coming to us. By the way, some people actually travel to us, stay in Airbnbs, or might stay at Weimar during the summer when they have more availability and stuff. We'll stay for 3 weeks and do their care and then go back home. And we can actually do that because you're in California with us. But if you can't come, or you want somebody else to get help, and this is across the country, all over the world, you can do this. You can sign up for the intensive outpatient online program, and we just started that up. We had a pilot program, and now we're continuing to do it. So I don't know when the next one starts or how it works, because I'm not responsible for that, but I was in it. So you'll see me, you'll see Dr. Cruz, you'll see Dr. Binus in there as well. So you'll be learning through video and then coaching interaction as well.
So here's a question.
Okay.
So a lot of times there's some unclarity for us between mental health issues and demonic issues. And so, of course, we see in the Bible some of the things that happen, and we know in foreign countries that this is very clear. It's a much more clear. But in the United States, a lot of times we're just not sure. Can you speak to that?
Yes, I will try to. So when I was working in the group home, I'll just start with this. I was working with a psychiatrist. I think she would kind of say she was a Christian, but she didn't practice anything. And I remembered a lot of the kids I was working with, they would say things like, I see my dead uncle at night and I talk to him and he gives me advice, and all of these other things. And I knew, like, oh, I don't want the doctor to give him medications for these things, because they don't sound like psychosis. They sound like just, this is part of the culture. We talk to our dead relatives and that sort of thing. And so one time, now remember, working in this practice, when you work with a lot of people who have been indoctrinated with Eastern religion type stuff, most of them, I don't work in a profession that a lot of Christians work in. I'm not saying within the Adventist church there can be Christians or Adventists who do this, but largely the practice of mental health has been taken over by Eastern religion. And so it's hard to look at those things and nobody's doing research on this stuff. But I will tell you that I don't think I've ever met a person who is dealing with that really deep, dark stuff that doesn't also tell me that they're dabbling in spiritualism in some way, shape, or form. And by the way, I can't, not that I know all of it, but there is so much demonic stuff in music nowadays. And I'm not even being like that paranoid parent that just doesn't want their kids to listen to rock and roll sort of thing. They're in our culture, in celebrity culture, they are literally, I just read an article the other day about an actor who's dating a witch. Like, she's a doctor and a witch. And I was like, they're admitting this stuff now. And so if these people are practicing these things, what do you think is happening when you listen to them? You're being overtaken. Drugs is another thing. Most people think, oh, cannabis is okay, no big deal. It's medicinal. I use it medicinally. Do you know you can get a psychotic break from using cannabis? Marijuana. You can have a psychotic break. I've seen it multiple times. I personally believe that there are demons that excel in all types of things. I don't go around saying, well, you're demon possessed and you're this and you're that. I don't think I'm qualified to make those kinds of distinctions. But I will tell you that when you really get to know people and their struggles, the general population, there's a lot of demon involvement that I see. Lots of stuff. And there is almost nothing on television or movies nowadays that does not have spiritualism in it. Like, it's just safer not to watch anything because it's so ripe with spiritualistic stuff. Even the stuff you'd think like that's not a big deal, they find a way to put it in there, and you're like, really? This? I thought this was safe. But they put it in there. And so I think it's just getting worse. I do not believe that I will be out of a job until the other side of heaven. And unfortunately, I see it happening more and more in the church where, parents don't necessarily know what their kids are involved in. And I call it the deep, dark web because there's a lot of stuff online, too, that's really scary. And I don't even know the half of it. That's how much I know, don't know the half of it. I know that there's just tons of stuff happening. I talk to kids all the time. I love working with kids. I mean kids like little kids, teenagers, even some kids who are young adults. They should be adults, but they're acting more like kids. And almost none of them, even the Adventist ones, are not involved. That was a double negative. They're all seeing things that they shouldn't be seeing. It's really, really sad. Satan's good. Like, he's really good. And we're not a match for him, only God is. So without prayer and fasting, that's what Jesus said, without prayer and fasting, these things won't come out of them. And so I do think a lot of prayer and fasting. I also think there's been some evidence that, with really heavy stuff like schizophrenia, getting people to work outside with their hands. We largely live in a 2D society. We're on computers and screens and everything. And I remember playing outside when I was a kid, and most kids don't go outside. Most kids don't even want to get their driver's license at 16 anymore. They're still having their parents drive them around in their 20s. Do you know that the rates of getting your driver's license is getting higher? The age is getting higher and higher every year. Kids don't want, there's no incentive when you've got everything in front of you, and you can play video games now with all your so-called friends in other countries and around the world that you don't actually know. Do you know young people are dating but they're never meeting? I meet kids or young people all the time that say they've got a girlfriend or a boyfriend or whatever all over the place, and they've never even met this person. They just met him online. Like, well, I guess we won't be having babies out of wedlock anymore because they don't even see each other. That's one good thing out of this. But it's sad that we've lost that human connection in a healthy way, and we've replaced it with screens and all that sort of thing. And I'm not saying everything about screens is bad, but I do think there's a lot of demonic stuff that is happening because Satan is smart. I'll give him that much. He's very, very smart. He's been adapting and changing his ways over and over again, and he's even changing our culture, and we're buying it. So, yeah, we do need to be sober and vigilant. We absolutely do need to. But, yeah, I see it.
Another question.
Mm-hmm.
What is resilience, and how can we understand how to make that a part of the way we deal with difficult situations?
Mm-hmm. So resilience is the way that you deal with stuff. Does everything like make you fall to the ground and fall apart, or do you have another word for resilience is grit? You know, are you able to withstand difficult things? And that's essentially what I was talking about today in the last presentation is a lot of us, when things happen, we fall apart. We don't know what to do. But resilience is being able to step back and say, okay, what can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? And that's actually, you know, when I was working in the group home, I didn't get fired from that job, but I had a really, really difficult boss. He loved to put me down day in and day out. The only reason I lasted for 7 years at that job, he was there for 6.5 of those 7 years. The first 6.5 of those 7 years. Do you know the only reason I think I lasted there was because I determined in my heart to be like Joseph. That's the only reason, and I was determined that God had a reason for me to be there. Otherwise, he would have given me other jobs or put me in a different place. By the way, I do believe that God is ultimately my employer. I work for him, and he helps me find the jobs or gives me the jobs based on what he wants me to do. And so resilience is being able to say, this isn't the end of my story. This is just a chapter. And I can keep going, and God can give me the strength. His biddings are enablings. So whatever he allows me to go through, and why did he allow Joseph to go through what he went through? He was largely indulged in his home growing up. He had a good life, a little too good, right? And God needed him to be greater than that, to be able to not just withstand bad times, but he was about to be second in command of Egypt. In name only, really, he was in command. Did God need somebody he could trust in that position too? And so God lets us go through difficult things. Also, I consider, do you know how many people in the Bible were shepherds before they did anything big? If I can't handle the mundane, the non-acknowledged, I don't get enough attention for it jobs, how can God expect me to handle the bigger things? So you might be tending sheep right now. That might be what you're doing. Can you be resilient, and can you do all to the glory of God while you're in that? Or do you fret and go, well, this isn't big enough. I need to do something bigger. If you're the janitor, be the best janitor you can be. If you're stay-at-home mom, be the best stay-at-home mom you can be. Actually, that's the best job, we're told, right? You're literally building characters for people to go on beyond you. What a legacy to lead. So that's resilience to me. Yes?
Plus, I believe those resilient things, then you are the best thing ever to help people
Mm-hmm.
down the road.
Oh, absolutely. And I mentioned that earlier. Yeah, your traumas, your hurts, your pains, God wants to use for something even better after that. And that's why I'm in my job. I think I told Janice this, that I get paid now to do what I did for free the first 18 years of my life. I won't tell you why. But I like to think, when God sends something, I say, what do you got? Bring it on. Not because I know what to do, but I serve a great God and he knows what to do, and I'm just along for the ride and I get to see what he's going to do with it. I don't want to stop that. That's way better than any entertainment you can have anyway.
I have another question.
Okay.
You earlier mentioned prayer and fasting, and you did it in the context, and I kind of want to visit this. You did it in the context, I believe, with parents with adult children. And here in our sanctuary and in our church, we have those great-grandparents, those grandparents, and parents that have adult children that we're all praying for. And many of those kids, were raised in the church, and a traumatic event happens, a death, a divorce, job loss, a host of things, and it swings them to a way extreme, and they're just going off on a immoral tangent that no way mom and dad or grandma and grandpa ever raised them this way. I know that's very general, but are there any things, I guess intervention, is there a point where intervention, aside from prayer and fasting, which must happen all the time, is there a point where there's an interventive step, or you can just address the whole?
Yeah, one of the interventions, and I think I mentioned this earlier too, is, sometimes we, for lack of a better way of saying it, we indulge those kids because we're afraid of what might happen to them if we don't take care of them, pay their bills, let them live with us, and all that sort of thing. Sometimes that's making their lives a little too comfortable with their decisions. I'm not going to say when and how you should know that or anything. I don't know because I haven't talked to everybody. But sometimes we want to continue to indulge that behavior because we think, well, what could happen if I don't? So sometimes the best thing is to say, you know what? We're going to cut you off financially if you're going to make this decision, or if you want to go down this path, because otherwise we're actually enabling it. And so, that's a hard thing to say, but I don't think it's too contrary to how God treats us sometimes too, because how else do we know what his protective care feels like?
If I practice tough love, we're going to lose them forever.
Yes. But that's also the reason why we do in the church sometimes, well, if we don't have this kind of music, then they're all going to leave, right? Isn't that the same thinking that we do? And so don't compromise what's good for what might be less good. Hold to the standard. And, I'll just give an example. So when I was working in the group home, I loved working in the group home for 7 years, despite dealing with authority that I worked under, because I learned so much because these kids lived in this environment. And one day, I realized these kids are watching far too much television. I had no control over that. Even if I did, none of the other staff would have supported me in it. I offered all the staff $100 that I worked with if they would turn the TVs off for a week. Do you know how many people took my offer? 0. These people made a lot less money than I did, and they were not willing to turn the TV off just for a week to try and experiment with the kids. What does that tell you? difficult. So one day I decided, well, I'm going to try something. So I went in the living room because there was a house and then 6 bedrooms for the kids. I went in the living room and I took a coloring book with me, or a bunch of coloring books and some crayons, and I sat down on the floor at the coffee table that was kind of in the center. It was basically for show, nobody used it. And I said, anybody want to color with me? What do you think 6 kids on probation said? No, that wasn't what they said. You're far too nice. You can be my new client. I love that answer. Sure, I'll do that. No, they did not say that at all. They were like, this is, I'm not going to say all the things that they said, but they were very derogatory statements. And then they said things like, that's for little kids, or that's for kids. And I said, well, I'm an adult and I like to do it. And I just continued to color. And do you know what? I got 5 out of the 6 kids to color with me. Do you know why? Because I like to color. And I enjoyed doing it. I did not look like I was suffering under all the taunts and jeers that I was getting from them. I showed them that I don't care if you don't like it. I like to color. Now, one of those 5 did make harsh lines on the... But I thought, you know what? He's kind of with me here. He just doesn't want to look like he's doing it. Others of the kids, by the way, do you know what coloring book I was coloring in? The only ones I could find that were kind of appropriate, Precious Moments coloring books. So imagine 6 teenage boys from gangs coloring in Precious Moments coloring books. Well, there were 5. 4.5 if you want to not count the one that was scribbling all over it. Do you know what they started saying? I'm going to color this one for my girlfriend at school. If you like doing what you're doing, other people will start asking. This is why I love the psychology of marketing, by the way. This is why infomercials are so popular. Because what do they do in each infomercial? Testimonials. I truly believe that how we're going to spread the message in the last days, and these last days, is through our testimonies. Because people can't argue with your experience. We live in a very postmodern world, and you can't argue with somebody's experience. When you're enjoying something, people start asking the question, even if they don't let you know, why do they like doing it so much, and I'm fighting so hard against it? Maybe I'm missing out on something. So when you do these things and you're enjoying it, people are starting to question. By the way, when I left that group home, do you know I had multiple people who would ask me, they would say things like, I laughed at this, I have this like rash on my side. What should I do for that? I'm not even a doctor. You know why? Because they would see me, I ate different. I lived my life differently. I wasn't suffering with all the pains and problems that they were experiencing, that they were going to the doctor for. They started asking a therapist for medical issues. I was actually making lunches for one of my coworkers because he's like, my doctor says I need to lose weight. What do you eat? So I made him lunches 3 times a week. He got tired of it because I ate the same thing all 3 days that I'm like, I'm not going to make something different. He was used to eating out. So, but when you enjoy what you're doing and you're not suffering, that's when people want to join. It's your testimony that really makes a difference. You have another question? Oh, do I have a time limit here? Just going to keep me here all night?
This will be the last.
I have to leave tomorrow, you know that, right?
This is the last one.
Okay, what do you think of Amen Clinic? Daniel Amen doing brain SPECT imaging to help mental illness. I know just enough about him to probably be dangerous. I don't feel comfortable saying everything. I believe they're just brain scans, though, and then he decides if you need to be on certain medications, because certain medications work best when your brain shows certain things under these SPECT scans. So I don't know what the radiation of the scans are necessarily, that sort of stuff, but I don't think there's anything wrong with scanning your brain to see what it looks like. We do that not we, but people do that all the time. It's like taking a picture of you. Is there anything wrong with taking a picture to see what it looks like, or looking in the mirror? So I don't have any problem with it. I do know he practices, or I believe he practices the Daniel diet, so plant-based diet. So there's some good things that he's doing. But I don't follow him or know everything that he's doing, so I can't speak to that. How to help someone understand their need to renounce Satan's power in their lives that is causing outbreaks of demon possession. Did I kind of answer this one already? I think so. I don't want to force anybody to out themselves, but yeah, short of doing, some sort of prayer over them or something, but there are ways that we can, not endorse the behavior. So I think that's probably the best thing, and then continue to pray for those people too. But I think sometimes our anxiety for people overpowers our trust in God to take care of things. We want things fast. That's why there's so many techniques in this world that a lot of people are using, because they want to get something done fast. But I think the journey is really important too. By the way, for one of the next Brain People podcasts, I want to talk about slow living. Does anybody know what that is? We want everything so fast in our culture. If I want information, I used to have to go to the library to get information. Now what do? I pull out my phone. I can look it up really fast. There's this counterculture coming out of people who want to slow live. They don't want everything to be fast. If I want something, just go down to the grocery store, pick it up in a processed package. What about learning how to make it myself? We might need to know how to do these things one day. And so slow down. I think that's one of the ways Satan overpowers us too, is that we're trying to do everything so fast that we're not allowing God to teach us in the point between A and B. So when we want something from somebody or for somebody, sometimes it's our anxiety, not God's anxiety, that's prompting us to hurry up and have it done fast. But I like to ask God, what do you want me to learn from this experience? And teach me how to help the other person be able to handle this too. So, any other questions?
I think that'll do it. What a blessing. Thank you so much, Amanda. Let's have a final prayer. Lord God, we have been so blessed this weekend, this Sabbath. We just ask that you would strengthen and refresh Amanda, that you would be with each of us as we go to our homes and as we get started this next week. Lord, help us to take the things that we've learned into our lives. Help us to completely surrender ourselves and each of our relationships to you, Lord, and ask for your direction. And we thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Hello, friend. My name is James Ash, and I want to personally thank you for watching our program today. If you would like to see more videos just like this, all you have to do is go to statelineadventmedia.org, and you can watch to your heart's content. And oh, by the way, don't forget to click the like, share, and subscribe buttons on each one of our various platforms. Because you see, my friend, this helps us reach more people with the good news of Jesus' soon return. Ministries like this require large teams of people. You would be amazed if you were to see how many people are required to produce each one of our programs. And if you would like to join with us by becoming a ministry partner, you can actually help us reach the unreached with the gospel. All you have to do is go to statelineadventmedia.org/donate, and you can give us a much-needed boost. Most importantly of all, friend, we need your prayers. I assure you that the devil does not like this ministry, and your prayers are what protect and direct what we do here. Once again, thank you from the bottom of our hearts.